Thank you so much, John. So John was one of the first people I met in the community who was doing this work, and oh my goodness, he's been my lifeline, and so many others have become my lifeline. Their knowledge, their experience has been absolutely indescribably broad. So thank you so much for having me here. I am so honored to be here. And grateful to be talking about work that is so dear to my heart with a room full of people who are in this for the same reason I am, for the love of God and the love of Christ, to respond to the incredible beauty that is our fellow men and women and our fellow creations of God. So I can chop half my talk down because first, Pastor Huff covered a lot of the ground. In fact, so let me kind of tell you who I am first. So my name is Kirsten Tollefson. I'm a psychiatrist, as John mentioned. I came on board to Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Harrisburg as a staff psychiatrist, but most of all as the program director of the LeBray Clinic. And our executive director, who took this risk in hiring me, is back there. And as I spoke with her shortly before this, she described what we do. So our mission is to bridge that gap between an individual who is struggling for one reason or another, maybe serious mental illness, maybe a really bad day, but needs that listening ear. We also do very basic screenings. We do assistance with setting up treatment, and we'll help connect with resources. All these things are part of mental health. We actually usually don't do psychiatry work there. We connect that with other, with ongoing care. So, but what we found is, I can list those 4 things, right? And they all sound like they fill that gap between someone starting to have symptoms and having ongoing mental health treatment, right? Well, what we're finding is that first thing, that one-on-one listening, that's almost everything. People don't want to start with setting up mental health care. They want to start with being seen as a person. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk with you in general, just about accompaniment, about how that is incorporated in helping people more directly with some of their needs, and the ways in which the face of that is a little bit different when we're working with people who have struggled with so much trauma and are in an ongoing state of crisis due to a lack of true and real safety. And I'm going to kind of talk at the end about some kind of structural basics that keep us engaged in the work and happy and healthy doing this so that we can share that joy with others. So, pardon me while I jump through slides because, like I said, Pastor Huff covered half of it. So, we already know this. We know that, and there's a typo. So, that's the other thing. You do this work, you're gonna fall down. You're gonna say the wrong thing so many times. Just get used to apologizing. I'm very good at apologizing. So I see people in this room doing this all the time already. It's putting the person over what it is that we're handing out. So in the cold, in the rain, in the stifling heat, I see people out there. And I see people remembering names, and reaching out to me with a question, reaching out to John with a question, working in the community to do more than just respond in the moment, right? So what I'm gonna do is, a lot of what I'm doing is giving you a clinical framework for what it is that you're already doing. Next slide, please. Anyway, the next slide is about, this is a sense of what are we seeing first? And what is truly in front of us, right? So when we were going down to Tent City, there was an encampment. It was there, and it was a concern. There was disorder. There were conditions that made it particularly difficult for individuals to live in. People were mistrustful of us. Now, we know that, and we know there's solid reasons for that. We were seeing direct evidence of mental illness. We were seeing people who were showing that they were hearing voices, or people who were telling us and were visibly anxious, frightened, depressed. We saw substance use. We saw all of these things hurting people we cared about. All of these things, many of them could have ended their life that night. These are essential things to see. We also came into it knowing that this person had a name they'd carried with them since birth, or that they'd changed by their own choice. They had a history. They had stories. A lot of it was unexpected. We would find bits and pieces of just interesting things, and there was a moment where everything went wrong. And often, what we were seeing in the first list was the outcome of a nervous system just trying to keep that person going, right? So nerves were on edge, use substances. I get nervous at the word self-medication because I don't want to use the word medication in association with something that I know also does significant damage, but that's the truth of it. So, next slide, please. Part of the problem is that because of the circumstances, because of trauma, what we're saying, again, which is logical, is heard differently than we intend. So when we say we have resources for the person, we have resources. We have things that they need, without which, again, their life is or could be in danger. Unfortunately, they've heard resources offered so many times that often an individual will feel as if there's someone we're trying to fix, that they're a need we see that we're addressing in a concrete way. You should come inside. Oh my goodness, people are not safe outside. We want them to be housed. We want them to have the comfort, the safety of a home. At the same time, sometimes when people hear that, they're hearing, all you're seeing is that I don't have a home. Sometimes there's also an element, and I've had people show me this directly, that some people feel when we say that we're not recognizing the incredible work they've done to make their current space livable. I've had people show me how neat their tent is, the space that they built around it. Tell me about the things they did to make this survivable. This is not saying that I then endorse it, because I do see it as a challenge, but that does give me the opportunity then to hear, and once I know they're heard, gently to start introducing resources directly connected with their concerns. Then, if there's something also that I see as life-threatening, we are on the same page. We are allied in pursuit of a goal, which in my case is predominantly addressing mental health symptoms, whether or not it's a mental illness. Sometimes, I don't want to go the whole way, always the whole way to that direction. That is our focus. But addressing that, when that's not someone's biggest concern, is not helpful. And the other thing is, when we see something that needs to be changed, when we see that their health is not good and we want them to get better, sometimes what others will hear is, you think you know what's wrong. You think that you know what I need. Okay, next slide, please. So, accompaniment. Accompaniment is those things. It's where you are with the person, listening. It takes a lot of listening before somebody will say what they truly want help with. In a conversation with somebody, I will hear a list of concerns. A whole list is valid, right? I'm standing there wanting duct tape to keep my mouth shut, right? Because I know that I can't give them resources for all of these things, and I know that I'm there for a very particular purpose. I'm there to listen. And I also know that when I get to the end, I'm going to find that they've already called John. They're waiting for his call back. So they have worked with someone in housing. They are working with Kathy in the library on getting their ID. They know where the food banks are and they're using them. They know to go to St. Patrick's on this day to get clothing. So these needs that they initially state, they're stating their pain, they're stating a need, but they're not asking for my help with that need. But it sounds like they are. There was one person where it took multiple encounters like this. The first needed her meds. It was this complex situation. She needed her card. We had to call the insurance company. And none of this was directly psychiatric, but as she was talking about it, she was talking about her pain in this and wouldn't have been talking with me if there wasn't also a concrete subject. Took a couple of encounters. Finally, one day she comes up to me and she says, and she's crying, and she says, I still don't have my ID card. So it took a minute or two, but then she disclosed that she was very upset. Something had just happened. She was worried about potentially being incarcerated, really struggling with her mental health, with her mood symptoms. Once I heard that out, we were able to work together to come up with some plans, but what it started with was not her point, but sure sounded like it. And it's this movement into accompaniment that allows the person to get to what they see as the biggest struggle. Okay, so understanding trauma. So trauma is a lot of what changes this. When you go up to somebody who is doing well and is hungry, and you hand them food, usually immediately this becomes comforting, nourishing, and they receive it as such. Trauma changes the nervous system. So when we define trauma, we define it as a set of responses of the mind and the body. The body goes into hyper alert. The brain is scanning for danger, all it's focused on. The person is trying to survive. That means that the person is in a state where their entire system is operating with the assumption that they could be destroyed in the next hour. And this happens through something that's very severe, when somebody feels that their life is threatened, that they feel powerless, that they are in some way about to be destroyed, right? So the problem is also that when this happens, there are times where people stay in this state. What happened may be in the past, but that person may not be able to put it there. No matter how many times they say, I'm over it, it happened. Sometimes without specialized treatment, without forms of processing it, it stays in the present. And adding to which often they are, still that slide. Often, when somebody's unhoused, that's contributing to the ongoing trauma because they are still in danger. And what this means is, if we're talking with somebody, their focus has been decreased, because keep in mind, their brain is still scanning for danger. When we're wondering, why is it so hard for them to clean their tent? Well, the brain's priority is not organizing. Organizing is a pretty high function cognitively. The brain's priority is safety. People will forget appointments. They'll forget what you said. They will forget it because their brain was not fully listening to you. They meant to be. Their brain was still partially scanning for danger. You notice the theme here, right? Scanning for danger. And what can make, and I could go on about this some other time. Anyone who has questions, I'm good with that. But my point is that the place where people can you flip the slide? I'm gonna run through the next part pretty quickly. This is where you'll hear trauma-informed care, and it can sound like a fluff word. It's not. It's a set of principles that allow us to sort of consider important elements of it and reassess whether or not we're attending to it. But when we look at safety, we're looking at emotional safety, trustworthiness. Here's what it says. It says, do what you say and only promise what you can provide. But what it forgets is the million times you'll apologize because you messed up. You forgot to bring something. You thought that an organization had a resource that they didn't, and you have to come back to them and say, I should have proposed it as they might have. Know that this is part of it. So, choice. When there is a way to choose, offer that choice. If you're referring them somewhere, refer them to more than one place. If you're offering somebody food and clothing, they may be hungry. If all they want is the clothing is what they want. That gives them back some of that power that they have lost in their acute need and dependence on others. Collaboration, like I said, you want a shared goal. Empowerment. We've talked about this. It's really fun to find out what someone's strengths are. And it means everything to the other person because, well, first of all, you can't help someone without knowing what it is that they're bringing to the table, right? So once you know what their strengths are, that's what you build on. That's what you access, and that's where you encourage them. It also tells them that you're not looking at them as a homeless person or even as Joe the homeless person. You're looking at them as Joe, who loves to garden, never got to do it, played the drums, and started to go to college but never finished it, and in the future has hopes and dreams and interests. So, next slide, please. Accompaniment. So basically, as Deacon Huff mentioned, this is active love. It's what flows out of us with the living Spirit of God. It's what we do naturally when we're able to tolerate our powerlessness. There is nothing harder than listening to a list of legitimate needs that we can't fully address. Having nowhere to refer someone because there is no place for them to sleep. Knowing that we can't do a thing beyond loving them. That, I think, is the largest barrier to accompaniment. That challenge of sitting in the pain with them and our own heartbreak at not being able to help. I think that's a lot of the reason why it becomes hard to work with people who are unhoused, because we can't solve the problem, and it truly is a horrible situation. Again, this is legitimately, potentially life-threatening. What do you do when you're with someone and you cannot end that pain? You accompany them in it. You go there with them, only so much as you are able. But when someone knows that you're willing to stand there with them, it transforms their experience of the suffering. It doesn't get rid of it. I wish it did. This kills us all, but it transforms it. The practical, the whole tolerating everything. Now, the other thing is greeting people, learning their name, making eye contact. I'm abysmal with names. This is like my worst struggle. Honestly, I once went to introduce my parents, got nervous, and forgot their names. I was in my 30s. So, I spend every day apologizing to the nth degree, trying to, kind of repeating their name. But now I know some people in the community who are fantastic with names, so I'll call them and be like, what's this person's name? So be curious, enjoy this. Wait to offer resources until they're finished. And trust that what you're doing has value. Hard to believe it has value. The person may not respond very well. I've had someone who pretty much gave me a dirty look and walked away 98% of the time. Then one day she's walking by our mobile unit, we're in Tent City, and she says to this person who walked, yeah, talk to them, they're really good. She did, by the way, come to our walk-in clinic after we knew her for about 7 months, which was magical. So, next slide, please. Hardest thing ever to talk about, right? Because, first of all, I've been told in past jobs that I probably am a little too comfortable in situations where I should be more cautious. And, yeah, so not funny. So, I've taken safety and I've taken it out of feeling and I put it into academic. What's best practices? What are the best practices, right? Because if we go with how we feel and we're building these relationships, we may feel safe when it's really not smart. And we may not feel safe, but start to feel like a jerk if we say that. So what I say is always have, clear policies, always work in pairs, although there's more than safety with this. Trust your instincts. But the other thing is keep in mind that we're concerned about this because we know that the people we're working with aren't safe. So going in thinking that there's something wrong with us if we're saying it's not safe is kind of bizarre. We also don't want people's need to protect us and concern about us to interfere with our work. So sometimes people will express worry about me. I don't want them thinking about that. The other thing is that sometimes on a subconscious level, if you don't feel safe, you'll portray that and that will interfere with a person's ability to sort of share your calm because your calm's not quite there. The other thing about going in with two is when you show yourselves to be a community, when you're joking with the person you're with and people are watching you, they want to join that. And that models for them that you're worth talking to because you're kind to people or you have a good sense of humor. Okay, next slide, please. Am I over time? Oh, good, okay. Emotional safety. So this is actually maybe a little bit more important and less understood. So you hear about this, compassion fatigue, all that stuff. Now, sorry, I'm staring at some of my friends who, we won't go there. It's important to do this as a community. We're built for community. It's never worked to do anything in isolation. And carrying these burdens yourself does not work. And that means always being comfortable debriefing in your group, being comfortable talking about things that are awkward, things where you might have questions that feel stupid or feel like you might be perceived as judgmental or as uneducated, uninformed. Don't be afraid to appear anything on that list of things you don't want to appear. Second, having someone who's not in the group you're working with, who knows what you're doing, who you can share your struggles with, but who's outside of your team, and just another resource, right? And who can also be like, you know what, that's getting to you. You were a jerk last night, and that was right after you came home. So there's this commandment that most of us like to ignore, the whole Lord's Day holy thing. So having some form of Sabbath actually is what we're designed for. Make sure you have time for your spiritual life and for rest, because we won't work without it. Even if we want to, our brains and our systems won't. That's just not how we're built. So the other is knowing yourself, knowing when you're triggered, knowing when you're uncomfortable, and that's where accompaniment can be useful because because when you're accompanying someone, you have to be in the moment. So you're going to notice your tension while you're sharing that moment with another, and you're going to notice when you are irritated with the person, when you are struggling with listening, when you become angry with the people with your teammates, when you can't forget what you saw or heard, and it begins to interfere, begins to creep into your sleep, begins to creep into your thoughts, and won't go away when you push at them. I mean, you'll always have to work to set aside these concerns, and your mind might always be going in places, well, maybe I could do this, and ideas are good, so I don't want to go overboard here, but that is what you're looking for. You're looking for a cynicism. You're looking for an irritability that wasn't there. You're looking at either being unable to forget, or stop the work. Because sometimes there, people are just crowding out their feelings by doing repeated activities. Usually that's not as likely to happen with accompanying, but sometimes it does, where someone drops their boundaries, becomes too connected with people, and starts to crowd out the rest of their life. The other thing is avoiding the work. Now, work always involves self-discipline. There are always going to be times where we don't want to do it for reasons that we push through, and that's necessary. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to get to the point where you realize that you really are powerfully avoiding it, and at that point, just ask yourself what's going on, and ask someone you trust. So, my final slide is, love this quote, St. Teresa of Calcutta, not all of us can do great things, but all of us can do small things with great love. And the great thing is in the mind of the beholder, because the greatest thing we can do is form a loving community that people want to join, and to bring our love as a community to people who are feeling that they are outside of it. What a bizarre, bizarre phenomenon, that we have people who think they're outside our community. And so, we're here to reverse that. Thank you so much for listening. Questions? I'm not sure, I think we have a few minutes for questions. Thanks. Any questions at all?
I was just wondering if you could briefly discuss the process of when they enter, or they're going to have a coordinated entry process, and when you come into play, or is there someone else trained in between that can assess that this person does have a mental health issue, and then they come to see you, or how does that?
Very good question. And I'd love actually to talk more about our program directly, but you ask a question that answers a lot of that. We are not connected with anything. We show up. Sometimes people will come to us to have just a discussion. The other thing that's important about what we're doing is that we don't have anyone, nobody is required to have a diagnosis of a mental illness, anything that they identify in themselves as mental illness, so that it opens that door before anyone feels stigmatized. So anyone can come up. In truth, what we found with the mobile unit is that we can't just stand there and wait. So we just walk out and talk to people, start conversations, and eventually people start to talk with us about what's on their mind. So that's where we start. And then we refer people, they'll send me people, and that happens as well, but yes.
With the work that you're doing, do you have folks with you that are not just English speakers? I've had a bunch of folks that have come to me recently asking for particularly Spanish-speaking counseling services that they could go and just talk to somebody. And so I was just wondering, I love everything that you were expressing around accompaniment and being with people. And I'm just wondering if there's anybody doing with you that also brings in language skills as well.
If anyone knows anyone, please send them my way. I just started trying to learn Spanish because that is such a need, and we do not have anyone on our team who is bilingual, and that's a struggle.
We do at CCU. We have at least three individuals that are bilingual. Oftentimes we have people calling in for coordinated entries. And I wish I did too. I don't speak Spanish, but when we have that happen, we do have one of those individuals work with that person to get that assessment done.
All right. Let's thank Dr. T again.